What another great week to be a Daredevil fan, with Daredevil Born Again episode 8 being one amazing episode, and I believe one of the completely new rewrites for this season, because we know from Daredevil Born Again when it was originally shot, they redid everything. Well, at least most of it. Where episode 1 had the reshot stuff with Foggy's death and Bullseye coming in, the rest of the episodes were pretty much the same from what they originally had, but now episode 8 and 9 are the completely reshot stuff and stuff that was done to correct the story, which makes a lot of sense with Bullseye returning. Which also means Bullseye ultimately is that final big bad. Where I was talking before, where I felt Muse was going to be that overall big bad for this season. However, with him dying last episode seemingly, and now Muse being taken off the table, it looks like that final big bad is actually going to be Bullseye, as Bullseye comes back, breaking out of prison, going after Fisk, and all the plot starts to unravel about what really happened to Foggy, why he was targeted, who did it, and all those things. So in this video, we're going to be breaking all that down, breaking down the episode, and going over all the fun stuff that happened during it. So first, the episode starts off with Bullseye being in prison, being locked away in an enhanced supervision area so that he can have no access to anything that he can use as a weapon, because pretty much with Bullseye's accuracy, it's kind of seen as a superpower because this man can literally just bounce shit off the wall and kill you. Just seeing how they've locked him away, but then they eventually moved him to Gen Pop, even though he was promised he wouldn't get moved there, which I feel part of that reason is because he was in the FBI. He was that person that put away criminals, so they kept him out of there so that he wouldn't get killed in prison. They moved him to Gen Pop, probably hoping that people would take him out so that the person who hired him, aka Vanessa, would not have to deal with him any longer. But then that seems to all unravel when he does break out of prison and he gets out of there and goes straight after Vanessa and Fisk because he wants to get his revenge. Most likely because he wasn't supposed to be in prison for long, he was supposed to get out, and he wasn't supposed to be put in Gen Pop because of him being ex-FBI. But we'll talk more about that near the end of the video, where we break down that complete shocking ending, because I was not expecting Matt Murdock to jump in front of a bullet to block Fisk. But that kind of all ties into something that happened earlier in the episode, so we'll get to that. However, as we move forward, we go back to Fisk and Vanessa, who are kind of arguing about how they want to deal with their criminal organization. Fisk wants to redevelop it so that they can use it as more of a legal operation so that they can be seen in the light. Obviously, there's still going to be the sketchy stuff going behind, but he wants to bring most of it into the forefront so that he can deal with stuff without worrying about being thrown in prison, at least for him and Vanessa, while someone else does the shady stuff behind the scenes. Where you also have him appreciating what Vanessa has done, how she's raised this business when he was gone, how she took over and did a fantastic job. And he was even impressed by the fact that she took out Luca. So that's confirmed after last episode when Luca went to go take out Fisk. Him and Vanessa had planned it all so that they could take out the one person who was trying to revolt against them. So just in general, really interesting to see how they're setting up the Fisk and Vanessa dynamic, and also showing how Vanessa's kind of like that real villain. Then we have Heather, who's dealing with the trauma of Muse attacking her, and I thought this scene was really interesting. How she's calling out people that wear masks are just boys who are trying to act more sophisticated. Pretty much just kind of throwing shade at Muse and Daredevil, as Matt's literally just standing there taking all this abuse without her knowing that he's taking any of this abuse, because of course she doesn't know he's Daredevil yet. It's all setting up her like very hatred for people who wear masks now after being attacked by Muse, and seeing these vigilantes in a different way because she sees them as cowards as they hide behind masks. So all eventually leading into this confrontation her and Matt are going to be having that is going to end up with them leaving each other. Because there's no way, after everything that's gone on this season, with Heather saying these things about Vigilante and how Matt's starting to be distanced from her, that she's not going to just leave him because of the stuff he's been doing as Daredevil. And I find it really interesting that during the scene she was talking about how Muse and Daredevil were only out for themselves and that she saved herself. I feel like that's just a good punch in the face to Matt. Like, he used everything in his power to save her, just for her to blast Muse and then be like, I saved myself. Like, come on, if Matt wasn't there as Daredevil, she would have been dead way sooner, so she did not save herself, but I guess that's her deep-rooted hatred now for vigilantes and why she doesn't like people wearing masks, because she feels like they're hiding something. So I find it crazy the way she talked about how she saved herself, because I get it, she did technically save herself, but Daredevil did most of the work. So poor Matt just getting the brunt of the pain, even though he was trying his best to save the person he loved. And I found it really interesting when we had Buck bringing Heather the invitation to the ball, where Matt's like, how the hell did you know she was here? Because obviously the Fisks have been keeping tabs on Matt and Heather, knowing exactly where they are. So that's why Buck was able to come in to give Heather the invitation to go to this ball. And of course that starts the confrontation of Matt not approving of Fisk being her client, because he does not trust Fisk, of course, after everything they've been through. And he does not like Heather being in his life because it's just going to lead to pain. It's just setting up all the ball rolling of more conflict between their relationship, of how he has this deep hatred for Fisk. She doesn't know the complete full story, of course, but once she does, I feel like she's going to understand a little bit, but still despise Matt for lying to her. And to be fair, Matt had good reasons to be worried about her. He feels like Fisk is going to be using her as like this showpiece about the anti-vigilante task force, to be like, hey, look at this woman they were able to save. Muse was dangerous. He went out and tried to kill her, but the anti-vigilante task force saved her. So just using her as a piece. And I do think Matt was right here, even though it didn't happen in this episode. It definitely feels like something Kingpin would have done. And of course, she ends up calling vigilantes dangerous, which I feel like is still a low blow to Daredevil, as he was the one that pretty much saved her life. But overall, those really interesting scenes just to see the conflict starting to build more and more between Heather and Matt, especially with after last episode of her going through that trauma. She's starting to realize some stuff isn't adding up, that Matt has been distant, he's kind of been doing his own thing, he's not always there. I think she's slowly piecing together that he has a second life that she doesn't know about, and I'm very looking forward to seeing how that all blows up in his face next episode, at least if it does blow up in his face next episode, especially what happened at the end with Bullseye shooting him. So very curious to see what's going to happen down the road. And also, one of the scenes I was not expecting this episode was the fact that Fisk took Vanessa to go see Adam and then gave her the choice of releasing him or killing him. And of course, she takes the option of shooting Adam and taking him out so that her and Fisk can be together. Which I thought was interesting, because this is kind of showing that after everything they've been through, like, Vanessa and Fisk they've had their problems. Fisk left her, didn't say anything. She went and cheated on him. And there's just an overall conflict of them breaking their relationship together in their own ways. But now you have her being able to make that choice, is if she can either get rid of Adam, let him free, and she can make the choice for doing what she wants. I think this is also a test, of course, for Fisk realizing if he can test his wife or not. She chooses the right thing by shooting Adam, and now they can go off and do their own little criminal empire by ruling the city in both Underworld and as the mayor. So very curious to see what they're going to do with that, because I feel like that was there to push more into something else. Like, we're not exactly at that resolution for that part yet, even though it's showing that Vanessa's loyalty is to Fisk. I feel like there's still something else going on there. Speaking of Fisk, we have a meeting with his council talking to them about the success of the anti-vigilante task force because of them being able to take down Muse. And that leads into the point where he's making Daniel the deputy mayor of communications, which definitely screams like this kid is not ready for it, but because he's such a kiss ass and he's gonna say anything good about Fisk and do anything to make sure Fisk looks good, he's that perfect pawn, like I've been saying, to like use to make Fisk look better. And then if anything goes wrong, it's easy to throw him under the bus because of how much of a kiss ass he is. If he ends up doing something wrong, he's gonna own up to it because he's scared of Fisk but also respects him, and he's gonna just take the blame. So I feel like that's what's happening. They're setting him up to be this person, to just be the pawn for Fisk. Even having that comment about how he's able to keep BB Urich in line, unlike Fisk was able to keep Ben Urich in line, where in the end, he killed Ben Urich, and I feel like they're setting up Daniel to try to kill BB himself because he can't keep her under control. Because by this episode, we know that she's been going around doing articles under a different name so that people can't pinpoint it to her. So she can keep investigating and doing her own thing as BB, but also reporting on the other stuff she wants to without people realizing she's doing both. And that way people will still talk to her without holding stuff back because they don't realize she's two different people. So really interesting to see how they're kind of going into there, setting up Daniel and BB having a relationship that could end up paralleling how Fisk was to Ben Urich. So very curious to see how they're going to kind of go into that, especially finding out this episode that BB knows that Ben was killed by Fisk. Plus, during the scene, we get to see the New York Examiner showing the success of the anti-vigilante task force, a newspaper we've seen throughout the MCU, like in the first Captain America movie, showing him running around New York. We have Daredevil, Punisher, so just different little pieces of the MCU that we have seen this newspaper in, so just a cool little connection for the greater all MCU. Then we have a moment of Kirsten telling Matt about Poindexter wanting to meet him in prison, which we find out that Fisk is the one that moved him to Gen Pop, which is completely sus. And by the end of the episode, because we find out that Bullseye was hired by Vanessa, it makes sense that Vanessa would have been the one that ordered them to move him to Gen Pop to silence him, or to get rid of him and along the lines. So very curious to see how that's going to unfold after next episode, because everything that happened with the prison stuff just led into the end of this episode, and it's just very curious to see, with him escaping, going after Fisk, like, what is this all going to tie into? Like, what is the overall arching goal here of Bullseye, and what was he really hired to do? We also have Kirsten and Matt getting in a pretty big argument after Matt and her were meeting with a client who was defrauding teachers, and Matt just loses it on this guy. He calls him out for lying, and he's not going to represent anyone that's going to commit perjury in court, because this guy will not tell the truth whatsoever. It just shows that Matt's rage is coming out after being Daredevil, after getting mad and like beating up people and getting into that vigilante way of wanting to help the public and not help scumbags. You see him really breaking now. Like, what he used to do is he'd help people with his small law firm with Nelson Murdoch and Page. Like, he was helping people, but now he feels like he's helping people that don't deserve that help. This guy's literally defrauding teachers, and he's not standing up, and Matt will not stand for that. And then we get into that conflict with Kirsten getting mad at him because of the fact that he's been missing meetings, he's been late to meetings, he's insulting clients. And that's where we have Matt really break. The fact that they put Poindexter away and really that didn't solve anything. He's just in prison and now he can easily get out. Just kind of going back to the Punisher's words about being locked up and then getting right back out. Then having Hector Ayala, he was proven innocent, but he got killed anyways. We get cops out here using excessive force, showing that the anti-vigilante task force is going around doing whatever they want without consequences. We have Heather being attacked by Muse and now supports Fisk. They have their current client who's ripping off teachers. And it feels like what he's doing is useless, which is just showing that Matt going by the law, following things to a T, isn't working anymore. You know, he stopped being Daredevil, something that was outside the law. And now by doing that and only working within the system, it's just not working. So it's just more pushing him to being a vigilante. Like all these scenes we've gone over this season have just been pushing him slowly into getting back to being Daredevil because the system isn't working. They actually need heroes on the street. There's so many dirty cops that they aren't doing their job properly. So what else do we need? We need a vigilante out there kicking some ass, scaring criminals so that they no longer commit crimes. Love how they've been focusing on his rage and how he has this fuel for justice in his own way, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds in the final episode of the season, how we're going to dive into the more Daredevil versus Bullseye stuff, but also going into the more Devil Reign stuff with Daredevil having to go around and get other vigilantes in order to take down Mayor Fisk. And speaking of Bullseye, we do have Matt going back to Josie's, where he hasn't actually been since Foggy's death by Bullseye. So after everything that went down, he had not gone back until this moment. And I love how Josie brings him in for a drink, just like this nice moment. We find out that she could rebuild the bar, but she doesn't want to because only way to do this is to get a loan from Fisk, and she refuses because she knows what Fisk has done to their town and the city. So just love to see how they kind of add into that with then Cherry arriving and talking to Matt. And they talk about how the genie is now out of the bottle. Matt has to be careful about being Daredevil because Fisk is after vigilantes. So just kind of, again, going into all that conflict about the anti-vigilante task force, Daredevil, and Daredevil needing more vigilantes to go against them. And I like how Matt points out that Poindexter and Fisk are connected. He feels this way, and I've been feeling this way since the very beginning. I said that Fisk or Vanessa might have hired him, and it ends up turning out I was right. Vanessa was the one that hired Poindexter to go and take out Foggy, Karen, and Matt, because they all worked for the same law firm, so they were all working on the same case. Well, at least in their eyes, right? They got to tie up loose ends, so just make sure they got to take them all out to make sure that none of them can say anything and ruin their plans. Which then leads to Josie pulling out the alcohol and Matt putting two and two together that Foggy was actually celebrating early the night of his death, meaning he knew he was going to win his case with his informant, which means the reason he died was because Poindexter was hired to go after him to stop that case from reaching trial so that their operations wouldn't be discovered. Even though Cherry points out that he just thinks that Poindexter was settling an old score because of Daredevil Season 3 by going after Foggy, Karen, and Matt, but that wasn't the case. They were just trying to stop the operation because Bullseye was hired, which I'm still surprised that Vanessa was the one that hired Bullseye because of Bullseye literally trying to kill her in Daredevil Season 3. But that's when we have Matt finally going to see him in prison and getting all that information of him asking if Fisk is the one that hired him to kill Foggy. Poindexter talks about how he wants to get out of Gen Pop and how he would give Matt the information, but as long as Matt helps him. Which, of course, Matt doesn't want to help him. Matt's not going to help his worst enemy, even though he's trying to bargain for his life, even saying a good man would defend his worst enemy, which all ties back to the end of the episode, where Matt is a good man by defending his enemy Fisk by jumping in front of the bullet, where in this moment, he's less likely to be a good man because this man in front of him is the one that killed his best friend. So he's not going to help him whatsoever, and the reason he helps Fisk in the end is because he needs his information, he needs his help, and also by doing that and jumping in front of Fisk, it stops Fisk from going after him as Daredevil, because if he arrests Matt and people find out Matt is Daredevil, they'll be like, it'll be a bad image for Fisk showing a vigilante saved his life by jumping in front of a bullet. Really interesting to see how they're going to dive more into that in the next episode and how Matt's going to jump back up from being shot in the chest. And I do love the moment where Matt slams Bullseye's face into the table. Like, it just shows Matt's rage coming out, being like, I hate you, I'm not dealing with this shit. But also it was a bad move because by doing this, it made it so that Bullseye can break out of prison because it broke his teeth. And that's why he says, thank you, counselor, at the end, is so that he knows he can now break out with a weapon in his mouth. Because when he goes to the infirmary, he ends up using the molar in his back of his mouth after the guard undoes one of the straps to kill the guard by shooting it through his eye, which is honestly insane, but it's not the first time he's done it because he has done it in the comics before. The first time he was able to do this was first shown in Captain America number 372, where he breaks out shooting a guard in the face with his molar. So just really interesting to see how he uses anything for a weapon. He also kills the doctor and the other guy in the room by ripping the scissors in half and using it as a weapon, just breaking out of prison like that. Just showing anything in Bullseye's hand can be a weapon. So you don't want anything near him because he'll kill anyone. Because that part of the episode was pretty brutal and I was not expecting it, but it was awesome to see. But this is also the part of the episode where I kind of realized that Bullseye was the big bad of the season because he's now breaking out, he's going after everyone, and it's just showing that in reality he started the season and now he's going to end the season. And it just gets me excited to see a proper Bullseye versus Daredevil, more than just that short fight we got, but seeing more of that, revenge come out for Daredevil, because now he's going to be going after Bullseye because of what he did to his best friend, and I can't wait to see what happens. But now let's go to the Red Hook Ball, because a lot of stuff happened during this scene, like how BB was invited and Daniel's talking to her saying how he's the inside man, and that feels like to me that he's going to say something to mess things up so that Fisk can be more exposed, where he's just going to make a stupid mistake because he's talking to this girl he likes, but also is threatening at the same time, and it's most likely going to backfire in his face in some way, either by accidentally betraying Fisk taking him out, or him being used, like I said before, as a pawn to have the blame pushed onto him so Fisk looks like a better person. I'm really interested in seeing what BB does to Daniel, because I feel like BB is going to take down Daniel in some way. Then we have Jack being there, aka the swordsman, who's talking to Artemis, who we saw a couple episodes ago when Fisk was doing his fundraiser, and she looks scared, which means Fisk has either threatened someone she cared about, taken someone hostage, or is using something to make her scared for her life so that she gives them money for the Red Hook project. So it's just really interesting to see him use his influence to controlling people around the city and, getting his way without other people knowing what he's actually doing. Then we have Matt finally arriving and Heather being mad at him because he didn't tell her that he was coming. He didn't say anything and just showed up. But this is also the part of the episode where she calls him out for being checked out physically and emotionally from the relationship, even zoning out when she's talking to him, which he does literally right then and there, when he hears Fisk going to take Jack into the back room to talk to him, listening to their conversation, but not listening to Heather, who's standing directly in front of him, causing more conflict in the relationship and making it so that she is getting more and more mad at him. But this is where we find out that Fisk knows that Jack is actually swordsman and threatens sending the anti-vigilante task force after him. But in this moment, Jack is not scared. Jack is not taking his shit. But it's also making it look like Jack is working on his own goals here. Like, he has a plan to take down Fisk, knowing he's this evil mastermind. He wants to take him down, and he's going to do it in his own way. Jack isn't scared, which this could all be a tie to the Hawkeye series, where Jack was framed for murder because of Kate Bishop's mom, Eleanor, while she was working with Fisk. Either that, or he wants to get revenge for Eleanor getting sent to prison because of Fisk, because everything that happened in Hawkeye with Eleanor and him all ties back to Fisk and the Tracksuit Mafia. So it makes me feel like during all of this, he has his own goals to go back after revenge from Fisk because of it, which could mean that Jack could be suiting up as a swordsman and helping out Daredevil later down the road, which could be a little cool scene, not really expecting it, but it might be a little fun and see what they do with that. But after they have their little confrontation and they leave the room, we have a guy taking a picture of them, and we get to see that moment of the anti-vigilante task force being those brutal cops who just use excessive force for no reason, like dunking the guy's hand inside boiling hot water. And you have the commissioner trying to tell him that they can't do that shit, but Powell just doing whatever he wants because he doesn't answer to the commissioner and he only answers to Fisk, showing how Fisk is letting the corrupt cops do literally whatever they want without any consequences. Which is when it's going to all tie into the fact that BB is now going to be working with the commissioner by getting the documents off him to prove all these cops are dirty. This is also where we find out that she knows that Fisk was the main suspect in her uncle's murder and that she's planning on taking him down. So just setting up more people working together to try to take down Fisk because they don't like him being in power. And that's why she's been around Daniel, is because she's using him to get closer to Fisk in order to take him down. So I just really like how we have all these different players in this season working to take down Mayor Fisk because of the fact that he shouldn't be in power. He's this criminal underworld boss who's been running the city for too long, and all these different factions are trying to make it so they can take him down. We got reporters, we got cops, we got vigilantes, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all kind of crashes down on one another as they all go against Mayor Fisk. But then we get to the part of the episode where Matt starts to kind of think more of a conspiracy is going on, where he thinks that Fisk is actually being a client for Heather to keep tabs on him, which I actually don't think is the case. I think he legitimately just needed someone to help him with his relationship, and Heather was that option, but then eventually found out that Heather and Matt were a thing. And I like how even though Matt warns Heather of Fisk being a monster, you do have Fisk going in the background there talking about Matt, of him being Daredevil, threatening him because he knows that Matt can hear him and can hear everything he's saying, just setting up their final conflict with him being Daredevil once again and Fisk going after him. But that's when we get to the major part of the episode with Bullseye pulling up at the ball. We have Buck warning Fisk that he's broken out of prison and just setting up everything that's going down, which was Vanessa sending Bullseye after Foggy, Karen, and Matt. So Matt calls her out himself by taking her hand during the dance, which I thought was an amazing scene of showing him realize who really did it. And even having Vanessa threaten him by saying, does Heather know who you really are? Showing that Vanessa knows that he's Daredevil. And Fisk also dancing with Heather, probably going to reveal the same information to her, setting up the conflict of Heather finding out Matt's Daredevil and then breaking up with him and having this huge fight about it. Now, the key note here with Vanessa being the one responsible for Foggy's death kind of ties back into the comics where Foggy faked his death, which means that in the series, Foggy could have faked his death. He could actually still be alive, and I think a lot of us could be in denial about this, but if the show is really running parallel off the comics, it could definitely connect to this, which in the comics, Foggy faked his death in order to go into witness protection. Now, in the case here, I don't really know how he'd fake his death after being shot by a bullseye and dying right there in front of his friends, but it still could be a possibility because in that comic storyline, it ties into Vanessa Fisk going after Matt and her husband to get revenge on them after she was diagnosed with a terminal illness and blamed both men on her misfortune. So, it could tie into it. She could be wanting revenge on both Matt and Kingpin at some point because Kingpin, did cause some pain by going away. Also on top of it, getting her to kill Adam. So there's still like a lot of stuff going on there. So this could be tying into the Foggy Nelson faking his death. And if it is, great. I'm happy. Foggy's back. But I'm very curious to see how they play that because I have no idea how they would fake his death after the scenes we've already seen from the first episode. But that's when we get to the moment of Bullseye pulling up and going to shoot Fisk, Matt realizing it and jumping in the way. Now, there's kind of like two things I'm kind of feeling that's going on here. First of all, it's him proving that he's a good man by stopping his worst enemy from being killed. But also, it could be a moment of him trying to protect Heather by getting in the way just in case she almost gets blasted herself. Plus, on top of it, if Fisk was killed right there and then, Matt probably couldn't have been getting the answers that he needed about Foggy's death. So he also had to save his worst enemy to get more answers, and make sure that he finds out what really happened to Foggy and why he was killed. And then on top of it, maybe I should have said four things, because he also could be using it to hold it against Fisk that Daredevil was actually the one to save the person who's being hunting anti-vigilantes, and now Fisk can't go after Daredevil and show that Matt is really Daredevil because it would show him in a bad light of taking down someone who saved his literal life. So much stuff could be going on here. It's just like so many big moments to really question what is really going on. Plus, on top of it, the scene where he's kind of having his heartbeat slowly slow down is kind of a reference / parallel to the first episode where he was listening to Foggy's heartbeat go out. So I just really like how they did that because it was like this really awesome scene of Matt getting shot. And what's funny? My friend was like, oh, is the season over? Is that it? Is it going to end on this cliffhanger? I'm like, God, no, there's still one more episode. Imagine if the season ended here. That would be literally insane and I could not handle it. But this does beg the question of why did Bullseye go after Fisk? And I think it's, first of all, to get revenge on Vanessa. So if Vanessa is the one that hired him and moved him to Gen Pop, it would be him going after her being like, hey, you told me you protect me in the solitary confinement. And now I'm no longer in that solitary confinement and I'm in Gen Pop and I'm not protected. So it's him going after the person she loves in order to get the revenge of her screwing him over rather than just killing her himself. She wants her to feel that pain. Either that, or he thought Fisk is the one that hired him and he took out Fisk to get revenge. So either or. But really interesting to see how they kind of tie into this, and I can't wait to see how they kind of dive more into it in the final episode. What epic stuff is going to come on. And I feel like, if I remember correctly, I think Punisher is going to be showing up in the final episode, so that's going to be insane. And the Dirty Cops are going to be wearing those Punisher logos at 2. So it's just like big moments are going to come in next episode. I don't know how they're going to do it, but like, I'm excited. I feel like it's going to be an action-packed episode with some really awesome moments, some big drama, and some just fantastic moments to show Daredevil Born Again being an amazing series. But let me know, what did you think of this new episode? What do you think's really going on? Do you think Foggy fakes his death? And why do you think Bullseye actually targeted Fisk? I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And you get to stay up to date with all my Daredevil, Marvel, DC, anime breakdowns. If you like Jurassic World, I did do a Jurassic World Chaos Theory Season 3 breakdown. It'll be linked at the end of this video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you later.